Welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Gini Dietrich.
And today, Ginny, I want to know how much you charge so I know how much I should charge. Okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Right after this. So today we're going to talk about a favorite topic that many of you have, which is pricing. Everybody wants to know, how much should I charge? And sometimes they even want to know what you charge so they can figure out what they should charge.
Yes. So there was actually a question in the SpinSucks community on this very thing, asking for a great benchmark report for average PR agency retainers and hourly rates for team members so that they could make sure in a new business pitch that they're in the ballpark for industry standards.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Ginny?
I do. Do you?
I have many. There will be no shortage of thoughts.
There will not be. My first thought was, when I read that, was, who cares what anybody else charges? What does it cost you to do the work? How much do your team members cost you to employ them? How much do you pay them? How much are their benefits? How much are their paid time off? How much is their insurance? How much taxes are you paying? Like, figure all of that out and then base it on that. You do not base it on industry standards or what other people are charging.
But Ginny, I might be leaving money on the table, or I might charge so much that I can't actually win the business.
Okay, so what? You can't charge what other people charge. People say this to me all the time. They're like, well, Ginny, you can charge more because you live in Chicago. I hate that excuse, because that's what it is an excuse.
Right.
I charge what it costs us to run the business with employees and their benefits and their taxes and everything combined, with a decent profit margin on top of it. And that's what we charge. We do not charge what other people in the industry charge. Some people in our industry charge $1,000 an hour. That would be great if I could get that, but that's not what it costs. So we really look at, and we've had this conversation 1,000 times, you have to understand how much it costs you to run your business, what kind of profit you need to be making to sustain the business, and then figure out how to charge.
Right. And people do say all the time that, if you are in Chicago or New York or LA, you have the ability to charge more. It's not that you have the ability to charge more, it's you must charge more,
right,
in order to cover your costs, right? Because if you
Right.
are renting space in New York, that is way more than renting space in Concord, New Hampshire.
Correct.
Right? It just is. I've rented space in both places. I can tell you there is a wild difference in those prices. And so what you have to charge in order to make what you believe to be a fair profit is going to necessarily be different. And the staff that you hire, you're going to end up hiring, if they're in the office, and this is sort of, pre-remote times, if they're in the office, you're going to have to pay them more because their rents are more, right?
Right.
And so if someone is living in San Francisco, the same salary they get in San Francisco, if they live there, doesn't have the same buying power as if they live in Concord, New Hampshire.
That's exactly right. So yes, I can charge more because I live in Chicago, but it also costs me more to have employees,
Right.
office, all of the stuff, right? So yes, that is true. Also, we work with clients around the globe, not just in the United States of America, but around the globe. And I also have to take into account that somebody in Concord, New Hampshire may not be able to pay the same that somebody in Chicago would have to pay. So I have to take all of that into account. So I never look at it from the perspective of what are industry standards or what are other people charging. I look at it from the perspective of, how much does it cost for me to run this business? How much do I want to make in profit? And then figure out what I'm going to charge.
Right. And I see this, it's pervasive across all sorts of different industries. It's not just the agency world, but far too many people worry too much about what their perceived competitors are doing, how much they're charging, what they're offering. And you need to start by looking at yourself. Do those things matter at some point? Yes, absolutely. But you need to first get your own house in order. And you need to understand, as we've talked about, what does it cost you to provide the service? What kind of profit margin are you looking to achieve? Now you've got that floor, right? I talk all the time about floor to ceiling pricing. Figure out what that floor is. That other intelligence might be helpful as you try to test for a ceiling. but it's still not a replacement for actually doing the hard work of presenting numbers to prospects and clients and figuring out, will they pay it? Right?
Right.
And so there lots of this data exists, but far too many people spend far too much time looking at it, worrying about it, asking about it, and instead focus on yourself first.
100%. So I was on Instagram a day or two ago, and I follow lots of food stuff and chefs, which I know will not surprise you. And Bon Appetit actually just did a checklist of how much food has increased for a restaurant in the last 90 days. And they said, okay, butter 90 days ago cost this, and there's been 141% increase in butter. Oil used to cost this, and now it costs this. Like, they did a whole checklist, and it was fascinating to see how much more things cost in just 3 months. And their point was, when you go to a restaurant and things cost more, this is why. It's not because of inflation and people saying, well, we have to pay more, so you have to pay more. It's because it's actually costing them, the restaurant, significantly more money to provide the same food that they did 90 days ago. And you have to do the same thing. You have to understand how much things are costing you now and account for things like raises and bonuses and cost of living raises and all those kinds of things in the future as you figure out what it's going to cost to run your client's business for them.
Right. And a lot of restaurants end up failing because they don't pay attention to food costs.
That's exactly right.
I mean, I have a lot of friends who have worked in the restaurant industry, have owned restaurants over the years. It's a particular passion of mine, as it is of yours. And so I've gone through these exercises where I've talked to them, and a lot of them just don't have a good handle on
Right.
food costs.
Right.
That is why a lot of them fail. Same thing with agencies. If you don't have a good handle on what it costs to deliver service, you're going to have a staff that you must overwork, because that's the only way that you can get the deliverables done that you've promised for what you charge. But you can't afford to hire any more people. So you just got to burn out your staff. Or your other alternative, or maybe oftentimes in addition to that, is you cut your own pay. Right? So you're underpaying yourself,
Yep.
you're overworking your team.
Yep.
What's the point? Why
Been
are
there,
you
done
doing
that.
And if your focus is primarily on what someone else is doing, you will never hit the targets that you want to have. And this goes back to some advice that my grandfather gave me back, not long after I graduated from college a couple years ago. And he said, just remember, don't try to keep up with the Joneses. And that's good advice for agency leaders as well. Don't worry about keeping up with all the other agencies. Don't worry about what Edelman charges. Don't worry about the agency down the street. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't. You need to figure out what's going to work for you, getting you the clients that you want at the profit margin that you want, and supporting the team that you have. If you do those things, you'll be in good shape no matter what all of this data says. And that I will say, that data does exist, right? I mean, there is some of the, Rick Gould does some great research that looks at what PR agencies charge. It's if you want that data point, it's out there to be had. I just wouldn't rely on it until after I had done like 7 or 8 other things, and now this is just one other thing I'm tossing into the mix of things I look at.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I mean, I don't even pay attention to that stuff. And certainly when clients ask me, we work things backwards, and I give them lots of examples. I say, okay, let's say a big question I get a lot is, how much should my minimum retainers be? I don't know. Well, our competition, their minimum retainer is $2,500 a month. Great. Do you know if they're making any money? Do you know what they're paying their teams? Do you know if they're about to go bankrupt? Okay, that's a terrible thing to look at. So we always work things backwards. And I say, how much time do you think it's going to take you to do this project or to do this work? And then we say, okay, based on that, we have a calculator that shows what it costs the team to run the business and what, the cost for having the team. And then we add all the profitability margin on top of it. Okay, if it's going to take 10 hours, and just for argument's sake, it costs $500 an hour to run the business. So we're looking at $5,000 a month. I can't charge that. No one will pay that. And you're just like, okay. So we have some choices. We can let some people go. We can move to, some full-time, some part-time, some contractors. Like, we have choices here, but the cost of running your business is $500 an hour.
Right.
That's the cost.
Well, and that's where it can be helpful to sort of, once you calculate those things, now you can look at those other data points to figure out, does this make sense, or do I need to change up what I'm offering or who I'm targeting or those kinds of things? So, when it comes to things like minimum retainers, I'll tell you that generally speaking, your minimum retainer should be about 4 to 5% of your revenue target, right?
Right.
So, because my rule of thumb is that you should target all clients to have somewhere between 4 and 20% of your total revenue as an agency in any given time period, whether
Yep.
that's monthly or annually or
Yep.
however you want to look at it. And so, if you sit down and say, okay, here's the minimum project that I would do, here's what it costs me to do it, and so here's what I would charge to do it. If that's not 4 or 5% of your revenue target, then you need to make an adjustment somewhere. You either need to adjust your revenue target up or down, or you need to change the service that you're offering in some fashion in order to build something that is both sellable, profitable, and also sustainable for the scale of an agency that you're trying to build.
Yeah, I know this is really hard for people, and I know that numbers tend to get people really upset, and that does not come to us naturally. But these are the things you have to understand if you're going to run and grow an agency. And if you don't get help from somebody who does, like I have recommended a woman to many of our clients who runs all of the accounting for them. She's sort of like what's the word I want?
Fractional CFO.
Thank you. I couldn't come up with fractional. Thank you. And she does that. She and I actually, because they're clients that I work with, she and I will sit down once a month and go, okay, this is where things are. Here's where they're over servicing. And then I can have a really intelligent conversation with my clients to say, here are some things that we need to do. And here are some things that we need to change. And then it becomes less aggressive to the agency owner because all of it's been figured out, and then they're being told these are the things that we have to do and here's why, versus you have to figure out what it is and go be on your way. And that always intimidates agency owners because it's not our forte. It's not what we do.
Right. And that's why I think it's important to look at this in terms of what are you trying to build. And the more time you spend on competitive research of any kind, whether that's pricing or services or those kinds of things, you end up building someone else's agency.
Right.
And,
yes.
And that I harp on, you should be building the agency that you want.
Correct.
And I guarantee you there's a place for that agency out there. There are so many different clients out there. There are very few agencies that you could structure that couldn't make a go of it if executed properly. Right? No matter how obscure your targeting may be or the service offerings, because you don't need to find that many clients.
Right.
You only need to find 10 people who agree with you that this is what the agency should be doing.
Yep.
That's how much it should cost. If you can find those 10 people anywhere in any corner of the world, you'll be fine. So focus on what you're trying to build. When you do competitive research, you're simply imitating other people. It would be like if I decided that I'm going to open a burger restaurant and I just went to McDonald's and I wrote down everything that they did and I just copied it. Right? Guess what? People have tried that. It doesn't work.
Wendy's tried it. Didn't work.
You got to come up with a different angle.
Right.
Come up with your own angle, your own idea.
Right. That's exactly right. And it comes down to marketing. It comes down to having a target niche. It comes down to having a target industry. It comes down to having target services. You can't be all things to all people. And I know that that's really scary for some. And I actually just had a conversation where the person said, well, I have to work, so I don't even care what the work is. And I was like, yes, let's not do that, because 6 months from now you're going to be unhappy. But let's start to figure out the work that you want to do and how to go after the clients that will hire you to do that kind of work.
Right. And it's fine to try things and then realize you don't like them too. Right?
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
And so I will often encourage clients to take a look and take on a project that they're not sure about, right? Because it's an opportunity to figure out, is this a good fit or not? You might be surprised. There might be things that you didn't think you would like that you actually like.
Right.
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 I mean,
Yep.
We've talked on this show before about how I dabble in photography, and I do mostly sports photography, but I experimented with doing some portraits lately. I kind of like it.
And you're kind of good at it.
I didn't think I was going to like it. It turns out I like it, so I'll do more portraits because of that, right? But I wouldn't have known that if I didn't try, right?
Absolutely.
Now, I've tried some other kinds of photography, like event stuff. I don't like that as much. It's just not as much fun.
Yep.
So I'm not going to be pursuing that, and that's fine.
It's totally fine, right?
Yes, and it's good, in fact, to sort of test yourself, try different things. Learn, but for God's sakes, learn from it. Don't just keep doing it over and over again because that's what you see someone else doing, or that's what some expert on YouTube told you. Well, this is what needs to be in your package, and this is how much you need to charge, and here's how you do business development. There are plenty of those people out there on YouTube. Don't listen to them. Listen to us. Listen to us.
You
We're much
you
smarter.
do watch all of them, and
I
it's pretty
watch them
funny. You do.
because it's great content fodder, and frankly, I want to know what agency owners are hearing
Yeah.
because it really helps put in context a lot of the things that in fact, before I started, really following this stuff a couple of years ago, I would hear agency owners, use certain phrases or things, and I'd be like, where are they getting that from? Now I know.
Yeah, you know.
I know exactly where this stuff is
Yeah.
coming from, and it's putrid advice for the most part.
It is.
And I don't understand why so many people get fascinated with it, other than the presenters do a pretty good job of presenting it. And look, it probably worked for them. It doesn't mean that it will work for you. And it's the same thing when it comes to pricing or scoping or those kinds of things. Feel free to learn, take this information in, but don't try to copy it. Don't try to figure out if you're charging the right amount, because that's what Joe Schmo is charging too.
Yeah, you can't do it based on what the industry is charging. You can't do it based on the competition. You really have to do it based on how much it costs you to do business, what your profitability margin is, and then figure it out from there. Because if you don't, you're going to end up being unhappy, going bankrupt, going out of business. Like, there's 1,000 things that could go wrong if you're not charging the appropriate amount for the way that you're running your business at this moment.
Right. And it's not just about pricing, it's about every aspect of what you're doing. There was a separate conversation recently in the SpinSucks community about sharing media monitoring accounts between clients and agencies, and is this what everybody does or they don't do? Who cares whether it's what everybody else does? Figure out what makes sense.
Right.
Right? Figure out, is this a model that works for you and for your clients? If it does, great, go with it. If it doesn't, okay, do something different. Just because it's always been done that way, either by you or where you used to work or someone you've heard about, doesn't mean it's the way you should be doing it today. Go ahead and innovate. Try something different.
Yeah. And by all means, like, I love that advice. Stop trying to keep up with the Joneses. It never works. It never works.
It doesn't. He had lots of great advice. Lived to be 100. Actually, have a video of his speech on his 100th birthday, and it was interesting to sort of hear the evolution from 1906 to 2006. And
it's crazy.
But that's a piece that stuck with me that I think was useful for today's episode. So
yes, it was.
So hopefully you all found something useful in here, but don't take any of it as gospel. Learn for yourself. Figure out your own ideas and solutions.
For sure.
That will bring to an end this episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
I'm Jenny Dietrich.
And it depends.